Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something really fundamental for anyone managing services. You've brought the ISO IE 20001 standard, the 2018 version.
That's right. It's essentially the international standard for setting up and running a service management system, an SMS. It gives you the requirements for doing that effectively.
A blueprint, really. And in this deep dive, we're aiming to be your guides, almost like instructors, maybe.
Yeah.
We want to walk you through three really crucial parts of this standard.
Yeah, specifically clauses 5, 6, and 7. Leadership, planning, and support.
Okay.
And these three, honestly, they're the bedrock.
Hmm.
You really can't build a solid SMS without getting these right first. They set the stage, define the direction, and make sure you have what you need before you dive into the day-to-day running of things.
So it's like laying the foundation before you build the house. Get this wrong and the rest is shaky.
Exactly that. It's about setting the direction, figuring out how you're going to get there, and making sure you've got the people, the tools, the info, all the support structures in place.
Got it. And just to be clear for everyone listening, everything we discussed today comes directly from the text of the ISO IE 20001.201N standard itself. We're focusing purely on what the standard requires.
That's the plan. So where do we start? Clause 5, leadership.
Yeah.
Makes sense to start at the top, right?
Absolutely. Clause 5, leadership. It feels important right away because it seems to place the ownership, the responsibility firmly with top management.
It does, unequivocally. Clause 5 is all about what top management needs to do, their role, their commitment. It covers establishing, implementing, maintaining, and, crucially, continually improving the SMS.
So it's not something you can just hand off to the IT department and forget about.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
The standard makes it clear that effective service management needs that top-level dries and visible support. It has to come from the leadership.
Okay, so how does the standard say top management should, show that commitment? What are the actual actions they need to take or ensure happen?
Well, Clause 5.1 lists several things. It says top management must demonstrate leadership and commitment by ensuring certain things. One of the big ones right at the start is ensuring the SMS actually achieves its intended outcomes.
Intended outcomes.
Yeah.
What does that mean in practice? Is it just the system works?
It's a bit broader. It links back to the standards introduction.
Yeah.
The whole point is to manage services effectively, meet agreed requirements, and deliver value. So top management needs to make sure the system they're sponsoring is actually doing that, delivering value, meeting needs.
Right. So it's results oriented, not just having processes, but making sure those processes achieve the desired business and customer results.
Precisely. Another key point they must ensure is the integration of SMS requirements into the organization's business processes.
That sounds important. Why is integration so critical?
Because you don't want the SMS to be this separate bureaucratic layer that nobody really connects with their actual job.
Yeah.
It needs to be woven into the fabric of how the organization delivers and supports its services. Not an add-on, but part of the core operation.
Making it the way we do things around here for services.
Exactly. Avoids that siloed mentality. Then there's ensuring that the resources needed for the SMS and the services are available.
Resources. That sounds practical. What kind are we talking about?
The standard specifically calls out human, technical, information, and financial resources. It's leadership's job to make sure these are actually allocated and accessible. You can have the best plan, but without the people, tools, data, or budget.
It falls flat, so they need to put their money where their mouth is, essentially.
You could say that. And this point directly tees up Clause 7, which is all about support, including resources. We'll get into more detail there.
Okay. What else is under leadership's commitment?
Communicating the importance of it all, the importance of effective service management, of hitting those objectives we'll talk about, delivering value, and just, following the SMS requirements.
Why is that communication from the top so vital?
It sets the tone. It shows priority. When leadership consistently talks about why service management matters, it creates awareness, reinforces expectations, and helps everyone understand their role in it.
It signals that this isn't just some operational chore, but strategically important.
Exactly. And speaking of strategic importance, they must ensure that what constitutes value for the organization and its customers is determined.
Determining value, how does that work?
Well, you need to understand what good looks like. What does the customer actually value? Faster response, reliability, new features, and what does the organization value? Efficiency, cost savings, market share. If you don't define this, how can you manage services to deliver it?
You need a target to aim for. Leadership makes sure that target is defined.
Precisely. Then there's ensuring control of other parties involved in the service lifecycle.
Other parties, like suppliers. Why is that a leadership concern?
absolutely, like suppliers. Could be external vendors, internal teams providing a component, even customers sometimes act as suppliers, maybe providing data. The standard notes that business here is broad in. It's your core activities. And often, those activities rely on others.
Right.
Even if you outsource a function, you are still accountable for the overall service delivered to your customer. So leadership needs to ensure those external dependencies, those interfaces, are properly controlled. They impact the end result.
So the buck stops with leadership for the whole service chain, even the parts handled by others.
Correct. It's about managing that entire ecosystem. We'll see this pop up again in Clause 8 when we discuss operational controls.
Okay. What is for 5.1?
Directing and supporting persons, contributing to the SMS and services. That's about empowering people, removing obstacles, promoting continual improvement. That's a big one. Links right into Clause 10.
Improvement always needs that top-level push, doesn't it?
It certainly helps. And finally, supporting other relevant management roles in demonstrating leadership in their areas. So it cascades down. It's not just the CEO, it's department heads, team leads. They all need to champion the SMS within their scope.
Wow, okay. So 5.1 paints a really active picture of leadership. They're not just observers, they're drivers, enablers, communicators, overseeing the whole landscape.
That's the intent. Engaged and committed. And flowing directly from that commitment is the next part. 5.2, the policy.
The service management policy. What's required here?
Top management shall establish one. It's the formal statement, the declaration of intent and direction for service management within the organization.
Like the constitution for the SMS, what needs to be in this policy?
The standard is quite specific.
Yeah.
4 key things. First, it needs to be appropriate to the purpose of the organization. So no generic cut and paste job. It has to fit your context.
Makes sense.
Second, it must provide a framework for setting service management objectives. The policy gives the high-level direction. Objectives give the specific targets. We'll hit objectives in Clause 6.
Okay, framework for objectives. What else?
Third, a commitment to satisfying applicable requirements. This is broad customer needs, legal stuff, regulations, contracts, internal standards. Anything the organization has to comply with regarding its services.
So a promise to play by the rules.
Essentially, yes. And fourth, a commitment to continual improvement of the SMS and the services. Again, echoing that leadership requirement from 5.1.
So the policy formally states, this is our direction, this is how we'll set goals, we'll meet our obligations, and we'll keep getting better.
You've got it. That's the core message. Now, once you've established the policy, 5.2.2 tells you what to do with it. It's about communicating it.
How does it need to be communicated?
Well, first, it must be available as documented information. That links to Clause 7.5 on documentation. It needs to be written down, controlled, accessible.
Okay.
And crucially, it must be communicated within the organization.
Why is that internal communication piece so critical? Can't people just read it if it's documented?
But will they? And will they understand it? Communication ensures people are actually aware of the policy. They understand the direction leadership has set, and they see how their work connects to it. Without that active communication, the policy might just sit on a shelf, digitally or physically. It needs to be alive in the organization.
Bringing it to life, making sure everyone's rowing in the same direction. The standard also mentions making it available to interested parties as appropriate. Who might that be?
Could be customers, maybe suppliers, perhaps regulators. Customers might want to see your commitment to quality. Suppliers might need to understand the standards you expect them to meet. As appropriate means you decide who needs it, but you need to consider making it available.
Got it. So that's the policy covered. What's the last piece of Clause 5?
The last part is 5.3. Organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities.
Making sure everyone knows who does what.
Exactly. Top management needs to ensure that the responsibilities and authorities for the different roles involved in the SMS and the services are assigned clearly and, again, communicated within the organization.
Why is that clarity so important? Seems obvious, maybe.
It avoids confusion, prevents things falling through the cracks because nobody thought it was their job, and it establishes accountability. When decisions need making or when something needs doing, you need to know who has the ball.
Right, accountability.
And the standard highlights 2 specific responsibilities that top management must assign to someone or some role.
Okay, what are those?
One is ensuring the SMS itself conforms to the requirements of this standard, ISO 20001. Think of this as the overall guardian of the system's integrity.
Like an SMS manager role.
Often, yes. Or sometimes it's called a management representative. The second specific assignment is reporting on the performance of the SMS and the services back up to top management.
Ah, closing the loop. So leadership demands results in 5.1, and 5.3 ensures someone is responsible for reporting those results back to them.
Precisely. It builds in that feedback mechanism. So that's Clause 5. It really sets the stage with strong, involved leadership, a clear policy direction, and defined responsibilities.
It provides the why and the initial who. So if leadership sets the direction, Clause 6, planning must be about figuring out how to follow that direction.
Exactly right. Clause 6 is where we start translating that leadership intent and policy into a concrete plan of action. It's about thinking ahead, anticipating issues, setting goals, and mapping out the journey for the SMS.
Like planning the route, checking the weather forecast, and packing the right gear before you start the trip.
That's a great analogy. And it starts in 6.1 with actions to address risks and opportunities.
Risks and opportunities. Okay, how do you figure those out?
You have to look at your context. Remember Clause 4.1. Your organization's environment, its goals, strengths, weaknesses. And you look at the requirements of your interested parties from 4.2. What do customers need? What do regulators demand? Based on that understanding, you identify things that could positively or negatively affect your SMS and services.
So what could go wrong and what could go really right?
Pretty much. The standard says the purpose of identifying these is threefold. To give assurance the SMS can achieve its intended outcomes.
So managing risks builds confidence.
Right. Second, to prevent or reduce undesired effects, stop bad things from happening or lessen their impact. And third, to achieve continual improvement, grabbing those opportunities to get better. It's about being proactive, not just reactive.
Okay, so we identify potential bumps and boosts. What does the standard say we need to do once we've identified them?
Section 6.1.2 gets specific. You must determine and document certain things about these risks and opportunities. Specifically, risks related to the organization itself, risks related to not meeting service requirements.
Like failing an SLA.
Exactly. Performance risks.
Right.
And also risks related to the involvement of other parties, those suppliers and partners again.
Okay, so internal risks, service performance risks, and supply chain risks.
Yes. And very importantly, you also have to determine and document the potential impact on customers of these risks and opportunities.
Why single out customer impact?
Because ultimately that's who the service is for. A risk that causes a major outage for customers is likely much higher priority than an internal process hiccup, right? And an opportunity that delights customers might be worth pursuing more than one that just saves a tiny bit internally. It forces that customer-centric view.
Makes perfect sense. What else needs documenting here?
Your risk acceptance criteria. Basically, how much risk are you willing to live with? You can't eliminate everything. So you need rules for deciding what level of risk is acceptable versus what needs active treatment. And you need to document your overall approach to managing risk.
Got it. So identify, analyze customer impact, set tolerance levels, define your strategy. Then what?
Then you plan actions. That's 6.1.3. The organization shall plan actions to address the identified risks and opportunities. This isn't just listing them, it's deciding what you're going to do.
Okay, the action plan.
Right. You need to plan the actions themselves, prioritize them, but also plan how you'll integrate these actions into your normal SMS processes. They shouldn't be weird side projects. They should become part of how you operate.
Integrate them. Okay.
And crucially, plan how you'll evaluate the effectiveness of those actions. Did your mitigation actually reduce the risk? Did you successfully seize the opportunity? You need to check.
Plan, do, check. Sounds familiar. The standard mentions options like avoiding risk, taking risk, changing likelihood, sharing it.
Yeah, it gives examples and references ISO 31000 for risk management guidance, but the core requirement in 20001 is that you have a systematic process for determining risks opportunities relevant to your SMS and planning actions to address them.
Okay, so we've planned how to handle the potential ups and downs. What's next in Clause 6?
Setting targets. Clause 6.2. Service management objectives and planning to achieve them.
Objective, so moving from risk mitigation to actual goals.
Exactly. The organization has to establish measurable objectives for the SMS and the services. These should be set at relevant functions and levels, not just one high-level goal, but cascaded down where appropriate.
Measurable objectives. Sounds like we're heading towards performance tracking.
Definitely. These objectives become the yardsticks against which performance is measured later on in Clause 9. And this standard lists characteristics they shall have.
What are those characteristics?
They must be consistent with the service management policy we discussed back in 5.2. They need to align. They have to be measurable. You need to know if you hit them or not. Quantifiable.
Right.
They need to take into account applicable requirements, SLAs, legal stuff, etc. They must be monitored, You track progress. They need to be communicated. People need to know what the targets are. And they should be updated as appropriate. They might change as the business changes.
So they need to be smartish, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, that kind of thing. Aligned, visible, tracked.
That's a very good way to think about it. Consistent with policy, measurable, monitored, communicated, updated. And you need to retain documented information on these objectives too.
Documented again. Okay, objectives are set. How do we plan to actually reach them?
That's 6.2.2. Plan to achieve objectives. For every objective you set, the standard says you shall determine what specific actions will be done, what resources are needed linking to 7.1 again, who is responsible for the actions linking back to 5.3 roles, when it will be completed timelines, and how the results will be evaluated measuring success, linking to Clause 9.
So it's breaking down each big objective into concrete steps with owners, deadlines, resource needs, and success metrics, turning goals into projects.
Exactly. It translates the what into the how, who, when, and with what. Makes it actionable. And all this planning, considering risks, setting objectives, planning actions, it all comes together in the master plan described in 6.3.
Clause 6.3, plan the service management system. This sounds like the big one, the overall blueprint.
It really is. The organization shall create, implement, and maintain a service management plan. It might be one document or a set of linked documents, but it's the comprehensive plan for the whole system.
And what goes into this SMS plan?
It has to consider everything we've talked about. The policy, 5.2, the objectives, 6.2, the risks and opportunities, 6.1, the actual service requirements, which come up in 8.2.2, and basically all the requirements of the standard.
So it ties everything together.
It does. The standard lists things the plan shall include, or at least reference. It's a pretty detailed list.
Okay, let's hear it. What's on the list?
The list of services covered by the SMS, any known limitations that might impact the SMS or the services, all the obligations, policies, standards, legal, contractual, and how they apply.
Right.
The authorities and responsibilities for the SMS and services, from 5.3. The resources needed human, tech, info, financial, from 7.1. The approach for working with those other parties, suppliers, partners,
Right.
linking to Clause 8. The technology you're using to support the SMS itself, like monitoring tools or ticketing systems.
Okay, that's comprehensive. Anything else?
Yes, and this is key. How the effectiveness of the SMS and services will be measured, audited, reported, and improved. This points directly towards Clauses 9, performance evaluation, and 10, improvement.
Wow. It really connects the dots from strategy through planning to operations measurement and improvement. It's the central roadmap.
That's exactly what it is. And one final kicker in 6.3. Any other planning activities happening in the organization need to stay aligned with this main SMS plan. You can't have conflicting initiatives pulling in different directions.
Consistency. Okay, so Clause 6 gives us the roadmap, assess the terrain, risks, opportunities, set the destinations, objectives, and draw the detailed map, the SMS plan, showing how to get there, considering all the requirements along the way.
You've nailed it. And that takes us logically to Clause 7, support. We've got the direction, we've got the plan. Now, do we have what we need to actually make the journey?
Clause 7, support of the service management system.
Right.
If 5 was the why and 6 was the how, 7 sounds like the with what and who, making sure you're equipped for the job.
Perfectly put. It's about ensuring you have the fuel, the capable crew, the navigation charts, everything needed to execute the plan and run the SMS effectively. It starts logically with 7.1, resources.
We touched on resources under leadership, ensuring availability and planning, determining needs. What does 7.1 specifically require?
7.1 is the direct requirement to actually determine and provide them. It says the organization shall determine and provide the necessary human, technical, information, and financial resources. And it explicitly links this to establishing, implementing, maintaining, and improving the SMS and operating the services to meet requirements and objectives.
So it pulls it all together. It's not enough to want them or plan for them. The organization has to actually deliver the needed resources.
Exactly. It's the tangible commitment to equipping the system and the people, the backbone, as you said earlier.
Okay, resources secured. What's next in support?
The people using those resources, 7.2.
Competence. Competence. So having the right skills for the job.
Precisely. The organization shall figure out what competence is needed for anyone whose work affects the performance or effectiveness of the SMS and the services. What skills, knowledge, experience are required for each relevant role.
Okay, define required competence. Then what?
Then ensure the people in those roles are competent. This could be based on their education, specific training they've received, or their practical experience.
And what if they're not? What if there's a skills gap?
Good question. The standard says, where applicable, the organization shall take actions to acquire the necessary competence. And it gives examples. Maybe provide training, offer mentoring, reassign people to roles they are suited for, or go out and hire competent staff.
So you have options to close the gap.
Yes, but it doesn't stop there. You also have to evaluate the effectiveness of the actions you took. Did the training actually work? Did the new hire perform as expected? Did mentoring improve skills?
Check that the fix actually fixed the problem.
Exactly. And, of course, retain documented information as evidence of competence. Training records, certifications, performance reviews related to competence. Proof.
So identify needs, assess people, address gaps, verify effectiveness, and keep records. That's quite thorough for competence management.
It ensures the people running the show are capable. But competence isn't everything. You can know how to do something, but not understand why or how it fits in. That brings us to 7.3. Awareness.
Awareness. How's that different from competence? Seems related.
It is related but distinct. Competence is the how-to. Awareness is the why and the where it fits. The standard says people doing work under the organization's control shall be aware of several key things.
Okay, like what? What do they need to be aware of?
They need to be aware of the service management policy, from 5.2, the overall direction, the service management objectives, from 6.2, the specific targets we're aiming for, the services that are relevant to their particular job.
Makes sense. Know the context.
Exactly. And crucially, their own contribution to the effectiveness of the SMS. How does their work help? What are the benefits of improved performance in their area? And conversely, what are the implications if they don't conform to SMS requirements? What could go wrong if they skip a step or ignore a procedure?
Wow, that's powerful. It connects their daily tasks to the bigger picture policy, objectives, overall service quality, consequences. It gives meaning beyond just ticking boxes.
It absolutely does. It helps foster that sense of ownership and understanding. People aren't just cogs. They see how they contribute to the success or failure of the service. It's often a missing piece. People are trained on tasks, but not on context or impact.
So competent people who are also aware of the bigger picture, what about how information flows between them and others?
That leads us straight to 7.4, communication. The organization shall determine the internal and external communications relevant to the SMS and the services.
Determine what about them, just that communication happens.
No, it's more structured. You need to determine what needs communicating, when it should happen, with whom, which internal teams, which external parties like customers or suppliers, how the communication should take place, email, meeting, report, dashboard, and who is responsible for initiating or receiving that communication.
So the 5 W's and H of communication, essentially. Plan it out.
You got it. It's about moving from ad hoc to planned, structured communication to ensure information flows effectively and efficiently, keeping everyone informed and aligned. Poor communication sinks a lot of ships. This aims to prevent that.
Okay. Resources. Competent and aware people, planned communication. What about the actual stuff? The procedures, policies, records, plans themselves.
That's the domain of 7.5. Documented information. This is huge in any management system. 7.5.1 is the general requirement. It says the SMS shall include the documented information required by this standard, plus any other documentation the organization decides is necessary for its own effectiveness.
So a baseline required by ISO plus whatever else you find you need for your specific situation.
Exactly. And there's a helpful note saying the extent of documentation can vary. A small org might need less than a huge, complex one that allows for scalability.
Flexibility is good, but whatever you do document, you need to manage it properly.
You do. That's 7.5.2, creating and updating. When you create or change documented information, you need to ensure it has appropriate identification and description like a title, date, author, version number, something to track it.
So you know what it is and which version you're looking at.
Right. And you need to consider the format and media. Is it electronic, paper, what software, what language? And very importantly, it needs review and approval for suitability and adequacy before it's released or used.
Why is that review and approval so critical?
It's quality control for your information. You want to make sure the procedure is correct, the policy is clear, the plan is feasible before people rely on it. Prevents errors, confusion, outdated information being used.
Okay, so we create and approve it correctly. Then we need to control it.
Yes, 7.5.3, control of documented information. Once documented information exists and is approved, it shall be controlled. This means making sure it's available and suitable for use, where and when it's needed. People have to be able to find the right version easily.
Accessible and current.
And adequately protected. Protected from loss of confidentiality, maybe sensitive data needs access controls. Protected from improper use. And protected from loss of integrity, unauthorized changes.
Keep it safe, secure, and accurate. What activities does control involve?
The standard lists things like distribution, access, retrieval, and use. How do people get it? Storage and preservation, keeping it safe and readable over time. Control of changes, version control is absolutely key here. And retention and disposition, how long do you keep old stuff and what do you do with it eventually?
Sounds like full lifecycle management for documents. What about documents from outside, like vendor manuals?
Good point. They're covered too. If documented information from an external source is necessary for your SMS planning or operation, you need to identify it and control it appropriately, just like your internal documents.
Okay, that's the how of managing documentation. Section 7.5.4 then gives a list of specific service management system documented information. What's the deal with this list?
Think of it as a checklist of the really key pieces of documented information that this standard either explicitly requires elsewhere or considers fundamental to a well-documented SMS. It helps make sure you haven't missed the big ones.
Can you give some examples from that list? What's on it?
Sure. Many things we've already discussed. The Service Management Policy from 5.2. The Service Management Objectives, 6.2. The Big Service Management Plan, 6.3. The processes required by the standard, those are detailed later, mainly in Clause 8.
Okay, the foundational plans and directions. What else?
Risk Acceptance Criteria from 6.1.2. Service requirements, which you define when planning services in 8.2.2. Your service catalog from 8.2.4. Your service level agreements, or SLAs, from 8.3.3. Contracts with your external suppliers, 8.3.4.1. And any similar agreements you have with internal suppliers or even customers acting as suppliers, 8.3.4.2.
Wow, so all those key defining documents, what you offer, what you promise, what your dependencies are, they all need to be formally documented and controlled.
Exactly. The list also includes any specific procedures required by the standard, and crucially, records. Records are your evidence of conformity. They prove you did what you said you would do. Think incident records, change logs, audit results.
Proof it happened.
Right. The standard notes that ISO 20002, the guidance document, offers more detail on this list, but 20,000-1 tells you these are core.
That list really pulls together the tangible outputs of clauses 5, 6, and 7 and sets up Clause 8. Okay, there's one more section in Clause 7. 7.6, knowledge. How is this different from 7.5, documented information?
Really interesting and important distinction. Documented information is explicit, written down, formalized. Knowledge in 7.6 is often more tacit, more experiential. The standard requires the organization to determine and maintain the knowledge necessary for the SMS and service operation.
The know-how, the stuff people just know.
Exactly. The collective intelligence. This knowledge needs to be relevant, usable, and available to the right people when they need it. The note clarifies it's specific to the organization, its SMS, services, customers. It's the practical understanding gained through experience, lessons learned, understanding system quirks, troubleshooting tricks, things that might not easily fit into a formal procedure.
So it's recognizing that not everything valuable can be or needs to be written down in a formal document, but that tribal knowledge still needs managing.
Precisely. It pushes organizations to think about how they capture and share this vital, often implicit knowledge, maybe through wikis, knowledge bases, mentoring, communities of practice, post-incident reviews. The goal is to make it accessible and prevent it from walking out the door when someone leaves.
That feels very practical. Okay, so Clause 7 really covers the full spectrum of support. Tangible resources, capable people, context-aware people, effective communication, controlled explicit information, and managed implicit knowledge. It's the engine room.
It really is. You put clauses 5, 6, and 7 together. Leadership setting, direction, and commitment. Planning, creating the roadmap based on risks and objectives. And support, providing all the necessary capabilities and inputs. And you have the solid foundation for actually operating a service management system according to ISO 20001.
You can definitely see the flow now. Leadership, Clause 5, is the why and who's in charge. Planning, Clause 6, is the what and how we'll get there. And support, Clause 7, is the with what and with whom. They absolutely build on each other.
They do. Trying to jump straight into the operational processes of Clause 8 without having solid leadership buy-in, a clear plan, adequate resources, competent people, and good information management, well, it's likely to be chaotic and ineffective.
Like trying to run a marathon without training, a plan, or the right shoes. You might start, but you probably won't finish well.
Excellent analogy. These first three clauses establish the necessary conditions, the environment, for success before you get into the specific doing processes like managing incidents, changes, service levels, and so on.
So, for you listening, reflecting on your own organization, this gives you a framework.
It does. Think about it. Where do you see strong evidence of Clause 5? Is leadership visibly committed? Is there a clear communicated policy? Are roles understood? How about Clause 6 planning? Do you systematically look at risks and opportunities related to your services? Are your objectives clear, measurable, tracked? Is there a coherent overall plan?
And then Clause 7, support. Do teams have the resources, people, tools, budget, information they actually need? Are people truly competent and aware of how their work fits in? Is communication effective? Is your documentation under control? And are you managing that crucial operational knowledge?
Asking those questions about leadership, planning, and support in your context can really help pinpoint strengths and, maybe more importantly, identify the foundational gaps that might be hindering your service management effectiveness, whether you're aiming for certification or just trying to improve day to day.
It really emphasizes that getting these foundational elements right is perhaps the most critical first step.
Absolutely. Understanding these is key, but it is just the beginning. The next step is diving into Clause 8, the operational heart of the standard. But without Clauses 5, 6, and 7 firmly in place, Clause 8 rests on shaky ground.
Really solid foundation to build upon. Thanks for guiding us through that essential groundwork.
My pleasure. It's crucial stuff to understand.
And that wraps up another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.